Hey everybody, it's Devin here, and I'm the Frugal Caveman, and today we're gonna make waffles. So this waffle recipe is a good alternative to your traditional buttermilk waffles. Crispy on the outside, kind of light and airy on the inside, and they're just downright delicious. So let's get cooking and let's get making these waffles. So first off, we're gonna start with the dry ingredients, which I have to my left here. So if you're doing this recipe along with me, you're gonna need a nice sized mixing bowl, a whisk, and all of the dry ingredients. I'm gonna put a link to the recipe here, but we've got almond flour, we've got tapioca flour, we have coconut flour. So we've got basically all of the flours that we use in most of the paleo cooking. And then we have some baking powder, and we have just a tiny little bit of salt here. And then for the wet ingredients, which we'll use later, we've got almond milk, which I have a recipe for making your own almond milk on my website, which I'll also put a link in the description as well. And we have eggs, and then we have coconut oil, all right? So we're gonna start off first with mixing all of the dry ingredients. So we're gonna start off with the almond flour. We've got a cup and a half of almond flour here, and almond flour is great. It's gonna have a lot of protein in it. It's gonna be lower carb than most of our other flours that we use, which is gonna make these waffles a little bit healthier. Okay, so we have the almond flour in here. We're gonna put in the other flours. We've got our tapioca flour. It also goes by tapioca starch. It's a really fine powder. Be careful with it. It can get all over your kitchen. I have made lots of messes with tapioca flour. It gets everywhere. So we'll put that in there as well. And then we have coconut flour here, just a little bit. This is about 3 tablespoons. We've got 2 teaspoons of baking powder. And we've got a 1/4 teaspoon of salt, which is just a little bit more than a pinch of salt. So we're gonna get that in there. Salt doesn't wanna come out. There we go. So we'll get this all mixed together, make sure there's no lumps. The 2 hardest flours with lumps are typically almond flour and your coconut flour. You just need to make sure they mix in well, because the last thing you wanna do is bite into a waffle and just get a big powdery puff of flour. That's not very tasty and not very fun. All right, so we've got all of our dry ingredients mixed together. We're gonna add all of the wet ingredients. I usually start with the almond milk. And like I said before, this is my homemade almond milk. I'm not a big fan of the commercial ones. They typically have different additives and different things in them that aren't super healthy. They have emulsifiers and just a lot of different things. So we added that in there. I'm gonna add the eggs all at the same time. I'm kind of a lazy chef, so I like to cut some corners and try to make it a lot easier, less steps. So we've got that all in there. I'm not gonna mix the oil quite yet. I do that at the end just to make sure it gets dispersed well. So we're gonna go ahead and mix these all together. We're gonna be careful here to mix this nice and evenly, and obviously not spill it, which I am notorious for doing. But what we're gonna do, and one of the cool things about paleo baking is you don't need to worry about over mixing things. When you're using traditional flours, you have to worry about overworking the gluten in the flour, which can make things tough, or it can make things really heavy. With paleo baking, we don't worry about that because there is no gluten. And so we can mix it really well, make sure that there are no lumps, and make sure that the eggs and everything are dispersed really, really well. All right, so we're gonna finish up mixing this here. I've almost got all of the lumps out. And we will add our last ingredient, which would be our coconut oil. And so this is only a 1/4 cup of coconut oil. Coconut oil is kind of interesting. It has a melting temperature that's pretty close to most room temperatures. So in the summer, it tends to be a liquid for us here in California. In the winter, it's a solid. So you might have to melt it, you might not. But we had to melt it today because we're making these in the winter. So we'll put the coconut oil in there. We're gonna make sure this is mixed up nice and well. Any recipe that has coconut flour, you wanna let it sit for about 10 minutes or so before throwing it in the oven or doing whatever you're gonna do with it. The reason is coconut flour tends to absorb moisture. And so you wanna give it about 10 minutes or so to absorb that moisture. It's gonna make this batter a lot thicker than it is right now. You can see it's actually quite runny. It's starting to thicken up a little bit. But letting that coconut flour absorb it, it's gonna make it into kind of that thick batter that's gonna make our waffles a little bit fluffier, makes them lighter, crispy on the outside, that perfect waffle texture that everybody likes. And then we'll let it sit for probably around 10 minutes while our we will let it sit for about 10 minutes while our waffle iron is heating up, and then we will get these waffles cooked. All right, everybody, so now our waffle iron is heated up and our waffle batter has sat for around 10 minutes or so. 10 or 15 minutes usually works, and you can see it's a little bit thicker now. So we are going to, see that's nice and hot. We're gonna oil this here. I have a coconut oil spray that I like to use. It doesn't have any propellants or any other additives. It's just plain coconut oil. We're just gonna do a really light dusting, which is gonna smoke some more. So a good trick is to put your waffle iron really close to your vent for your stove, and you can turn that on as well. I'm not gonna turn it on for right now because it'll make the video really loud, but that's a good trick for you at home. For each of these waffles, this is a Belgian waffle maker, so it makes them a little bit thicker. It's usually about 1/3 of a cup, so I grabbed my 1/3 of a cup measuring cup, and that's what I'm gonna put on each one of these here. We'll just do it right in the center. You want your waffle iron on one of the hotter settings. It's gonna be, usually if it has numbers, it's gonna be around a 4 or a 5. Most of them have a range from 1 to 6. And I've got mine set on 5 right now. We'll make sure those are nice and full. And we'll close it up. And now we just wait. Oh, hi, Kita. That's the only reason to have dogs, huh? So they clean up after you in the kitchen? Is that what you're good for? All right, so looks like our first batch of waffles is done here. So we're gonna open it up and we're gonna show them off. Look at that. Golden brown, nice and crispy. I'm gonna grab a fork here to pull these out so I don't burn myself. But push under there a little bit and just pull them out. And you can see they've got that perfect color, the perfect texture. Nobody's gonna know that these are not just normal waffles. They taste great and have a great texture. And there we have it. Those are our first batch of waffles. And there's enough to do a whole nother set here. So this recipe makes about 8 Belgian waffles. And then what we like to do is we throw them in a freezer bag, throw them right into the freezer. And then when you need a quick breakfast in the morning, you throw them in the toaster for 3 or 4 minutes, and you have a perfect crispy waffle right out of the freezer, homemade. This is paleo, lower carb, higher protein, much healthier, and still super tasty. So thanks everybody for cooking with the caveman. This is Devin, and you have a great day. I'll post the link to the recipe at the end here, or in the description actually. And you can go visit the site, pull off the recipe, and try them out and let me know what you think.